When the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he had died, he exclaimed, "This man truly was the Son of God." Mark chapter 15, verse 39, NLT. The final moments of Jesus' life are recorded in Mark chapter 15, verses 33 through 39. His path to the cross had been torturous. He had been abandoned, ridiculed, humiliated, and tortured. Now, as he hangs on the cross, Jesus breathes his last breath. Mark chapter 15, verse 33. At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. This would be 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and the darkness would last until the 9th hour, or 3 o'clock. This otherworldly darkness arrived when the sun was shining highest. Because the moon was now full, it couldn't have been created by an eclipse, because the moon can't intervene between the earth and the sun when it's full. This darkness was undoubtedly brought about by God's prompt intervention. Phlegon of Tralles, and Emperor Adrian's freedman, gives a description of it. Eusebius, in his records of the year AD, quotes extensively from Phlegon, who claims that in the 4th year of the 202nd Olympiad, a large and extraordinary eclipse of the sun occurred, surpassing any that had previously occurred. At the 6th hour, the day was turned into the darkness of night, so that stars were seen in the heaven, and there was a great earthquake in Bithynia. Which overthrew many houses in the city of Nicaea. Phlegon attributes the darkness which he describes to an eclipse, which was natural enough for him to do. Astronomy knowledge was rudimentary at the time. An earthquake is also mentioned by Phlegon. This puts his story in very close alignment with the sacred narrative. Saint Cyprian adds, "The sun was constrained to withdraw his rays and close his eyes, that he might not be compelled to look upon this crime of the Jews." To the same purpose, Saint Chrysostom, "The creature could not bear the wrong done to its Creator. Therefore the sun withdrew his rays, that he might not behold the deeds of the wicked." Mark chapter 15, verse 34. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which is, being interpreted, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. St. Mark here uses the Aramaic form. St. Matthew refers to the original Hebrew. This might be rendered, "Why didst thou forsake me?" Mark chapter 15, verse 35. And some of them that stood by, when they heard it, said, "Behold, he calleth Elias." Those who lingered around the cross, despite the mysterious darkness, are mentioned in verse 35. The darkness would certainly add to the dreadfulness of the situation. It was out of that darkness that the voice of Jesus was heard, and inasmuch as Elias, or Elijah, was believed to hold some relation to the Messiah, it was natural for some of those who stood by to understand the words to mean that our Lord was actually calling for Elias. Mark chapter 15, verse 36. And one ran and filled a sponge full of vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Let alone, let us see whether Elias will come to take him down." And Jesus cried with a loud voice, and gave up the ghost. And the veil of the temples was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. There were 2 veils, one before the holy place, and the second before the Holy of Holies. The holy place would agree to what we call the nave of the church, in which the priests were always present, and the Holy of Holies would match to our chancel choir, the holiest part of the building. This was always kept closed, nor might anyone enter it but the high priest, and that only once in the year, on the day of expiation. The veil which was rent at our Lord's death was that which was placed before the Holy of Holies. It was the responsibility of the officiating priests on the evening of the day of preparation, at the hour of evening prayer, which would correspond to the time of our Lord's death, to enter into the holy place, where he would of course be between the 2 curtains or veils, the outer veil and the inner veil. It would then be his responsibility to roll back the outer veil, exposing the sacred space to the people in the outer court. Then and there, to their amazement, they would witness the inner veil ripped apart from top to bottom. According to Josephus, These veils or curtains were of immense bulk, heavy and beautifully embroidered with gold and purple. This tearing of the veil now meant, first, dispensation, with its rites and ceremonies, was now uncovered by Christ, and that thenceforth the middle wall of partition was broken down, so that now, not the Jews only, but the Gentiles also, might draw nigh by the blood of Christ. But second, it also implied that the way to heaven was laid open by our Lord's death. When thou hadst overcome the sharpness of death, thou didst open the kingdom of heaven to all believers. The veil implied that heaven was closed to all until Christ by his death rent this veil in twain and laid open the way. Mark chapter 15, verse 39. And when the centurion which stood over against him saw that he so cried out and gave up the ghost, he said, Truly this man was the Son of God. The words "so cried out" are not in the most important authorities. The centurion's job was to keep an eye on everything and see that the sentence was carried out. He must have been standing close to the cress, and there was something in the dying sufferer's entire demeanor that was so unlike anything he had ever seen before that it elicited the spontaneous cry, Truly this man was the Son of God. He had watched him through those wearisome hours. He had seen the meekness and the dignity of the sufferer. He had heard those words so profoundly impressed upon the faith and reverence of Christians, which fell from him from time to time as he hung there. And then at last he heard the piercing cry, so startling, so unexpected, which escaped him just before he yielded up his spirit, and he could come to no other conclusion than this, that he was, in very deed, God's Son. In just a few verses, Mark packs a lot of punch. There's a lot to say about the strange events that occur, but today we are drawn to the Roman officer who admired Jesus after he died. Jesus influenced those close to him. The thief on the cross had reacted uniquely to him, and now the soldier overseeing him has to remark that he is the Son of God. Jesus had kept his identity hidden at the beginning of his ministry. Now it was plain for everyone to see. As a commander, a centurion was in control of the soldiers who dealt with Jesus. Did he participate in the soldiers' taunting and beating of Jesus as they crowned him with thorns? Maybe. Or perhaps he was too respectable for such antics. Maybe he was the one who gave Simon of Cyrene the task of carrying Jesus' cross. Once they arrived at Golgotha, the place of the crucifixion, the nails were driven through Jesus' wrists and he was raised up on the cross. This was just another day at the office, really. His function was to supervise the execution of offenders via crucifixion. But somewhere along the way, Jesus ceased to appear to him as a common criminal. Perhaps it was the way Jesus engaged with the world's powers. He never begged for his life. Perhaps it was Jesus' words of love from the cross that moved him. Perhaps it was the strange darkness that blanketed the land. Maybe it was the tearing of the veil. Alternatively, perhaps Jesus had imparted truth to this officer as they traveled down the road. Something stirred in this man's soul as he gazed at Jesus' lifeless body, whatever that was. I imagined him staring up at the cross, mouth gaping, as he wraps words around his thoughts. This man truly was the Son of God. What a declaration for a Roman officer to make. If any of the religious leaders overheard him, they would have lost their minds. He'd just spent the previous day persuading Rome to execute Jesus, precisely because he was blaspheming about being God's Son.